Bigger, Chapter 10, Part 1, page 80. With Isaac gone, once again there was no one to talk to but Bigger. Tyler smiled to remember that Isaac had asked, his voice incredulous. "You say you was talking to this here dog?" Later, the look in his eye, half sly, half suspicious, he wanted to know, "Does that dog talk back to you?" Tyler turned to study Bigger himself. "If you could talk, Bigger, what kind of stories would you tell me?" he wondered out loud. Now that it was just the two of them again, Bigger seemed more willing to walk almost at his heel, even in broad daylight. When they made camp each night, the dog sat so close beside him in front of the fire that once sparks nearly singed his muslin bib. At the first campsite they made after Isaac walked away, the grass was thick enough that Tyler didn't need to make a pallet of boughs. When he stretched himself out with a sigh, Bigger once again laid against his side, flank to flank. Tyler reached out to stroke the dog's head. "Won't be long until we cross over into Arkansas," he murmured. Into the darkness. The fire died down, and its rosy glow no longer lighted the underside of the canopy of leaves above his head. "We're getting closer, Bigger, closer all the time to finding Papa." Tyler thought about the X's he had made on his paper. There were 8 of them already, which meant he must have covered almost 240 miles. He always deducted a few miles from the total count, though, because he knew some days he didn't walk as steadily as other days, such as when he'd been so groggy after the blow Isaac had accidentally given him. It would make perhaps 15 days. It would take perhaps 15 days to travel the length of Arkansas and arrive at the Texas border. Traveling across Texas in mid-June might be perilously hot, as Uncle Matt had predicted. But he couldn't worry about that now. The only thing that mattered was getting all the way down to the Rio Grande. When Tyler studied his map, though, it was plain that the river covered the entire southwestern border of Texas. Where exactly along that snake-like line would he be most likely to find Papa? What had seemed like a solid plan many days ago at home now seemed shaky and uncertain. As he looked up at the stars, the boy soothed himself by imagining what was going on back at Sweet Creek. Maggie's pups would have their eyes open by now. Soon would be eating table scraps, not wearing their mama down with constant suckling. Lucas ought to have cultivated the corn again. The beans would have blossomed. The squash would already be the size of pulled eggs. Mama would be thinking of weaning Calico's calf, would keep it in a separate stall at night, then in a corner of the upland pasture during the day. It was late afternoon when Tyler crested a rise on what was called Telegraph Road on his scrap of map, and came upon the field. It was uncommonly green, so vast and wide he could scarcely see all the way across to where it met the edge of the blue horizon. On one side was a peach orchard, heavy brush along another, the brow of a hill rising on the south. In the far distance the boy could make out several figures. He shaded his eyes. 4 or 5 men were working with spades, turning up the sod. It was late to be getting the land ready to plant crops, Tyler thought, frowning. The war being finished so recently, maybe nobody's had time to do any field work till now. "We'll ask 'em how far we are from the Texas border, Bigger," Tyler announced, hurrying across the vast green expanse that spread before him like a smooth carpet. "Looks to me like they're no strangers to these parts, and will be able to help us out." Us. The word had a comfortable sound, and Tyler noticed that Bigger wagged his tail agreeably. His ears lifted as they hurried to where the men were working. When he got nearer, Tyler saw the men weren't exactly turning the sod over. No, they were digging graves. Laid out on the green grass all around, Tyler saw the long, white bones of dead men's legs, shorter ones of men's arms and hands, several skulls, smooth as globes, segments of spine, delicate as knuckle bones, scraps of cloth, blue and gray, all mixed together, belt buckles, bottoms, several pairs of eyeglasses in a pile, and another pile, shoes, a few of them hardly worn, dented canteens, crumpled caps, a small, mildewed book with writing in it, a crackled photograph of a dark-haired lady in a white dress. Tyler slowed his pace. It seemed an act of poor manners to stare at what was laid out right before his eyes. The bodies were piled like cordwood, the old woman had told him, but he hadn't wanted to believe her. Once the diggers leaned on his spade, a man not young anymore, his face covered with a patchy gray beard. He turned when he heard footsteps behind him. "What you looking for way out here, Sonny?" he demanded roughly, his voice weary. "I'm traveling," Tyler answered. "I'm searching for my pa." "Maybe he's one of these here chaps," one of the gray-beard companions guffawed, touching a nearby skull lightly with the tip of his shovel. The moment he raised the shovel, a low rumbling growl came out of Bigger, and the man lowered it hastily. Tyler was surprised too. Only a moment ago, Bigger had been cheerful, had been wagging his back end as happily as Maggie did on her way to a squirrel hunt. "What's wrong with that dog, boy?" the man grumbled. "Doggone mutt's giving me a look like he wants to take my hand off at the elbow." "Forget the dog," Graybeard warned, glaring at his fellow gravedigger. "No need to scare the lad or his hairy pal." Tyler hesitated. What are you doing?" he asked, hoping the question didn't sound ignorant. "If these men were buried, why are you digging them up and burying them all over again?" "They were all in a pile in a trench, Sonny. When an army moves off a battlefield in the middle of a war, there's no time to bury the dead politely. Each man to his own private spot." "Ah." So the old woman had been right about that too. "I'm pretty sure my pa ain't dead," Tyler murmured, touching the 3 letters in his breast pocket. Yet these men, whose flesh had rotted off their bones, were likely fathers to boys like me, or brothers to boys like Oat Snap, he realized. "Pa was one of the first in Caldwell County to pledge to Jeff Davis," Tyler blurted, as if the words guaranteed Blackjack Bohannon himself couldn't possibly be dead. Graybeard rolled his eyes. "Not necessarily a smart choice," he said. "They got old Jeff Davis in solitary confinement over there in Fortress Monroe, Virginia. Got irons on his wrists and ankles as if he was any common thief. Your pa would have done a whole lot better for himself, Sonny, to have gone over to those chaps in the blueberry-colored suits." "They captured President Davis?" Tyler echoed. "Yes, sir, they surely did, down there in a patch of woods near Irwinville, Georgia. Them Union boys ran him down like a dog." When the stranger had stopped at Sweet Creek, he obviously hadn't known what President Davis's fate had been any more than he had known about President Lincoln's. Tyler was almost afraid to ask about Joe Shelby, but forced himself to put the question to the men who looked at him with what he knew was pity. "You hear any word about General Shelby?" he whispered, dreading what the news might be. Page 86, end of chapter 10, part 1.